we need to have boycotts, and we need to have strike action in defence of living standards. The trade unions have a responsibility to maintain living standards, mainly to date through wages, but now our living standards are being attacked through the increases in the cost of living. Now, there's no mystery about the rise in the cost of living. It's not like a virus. We know why it's there. It's there because the owners of companies try to squeeze more money out of people for the essentials of life. That's what's going on. The crisis is flesh and blood. It's individuals making decisions about our lifestyle. And to give an example, the CEOs recently, over the last few months, have had enormous increases in their pay. Cement Roadstone, the CEO of Cement Roadstone, got €11 million last year. Did you think we were Egypts that were going to fall for this? We say, open the books. Let's have a look at the books. When the companies claim they want to raise prices, like the big supermarket chains, open the books for public scrutiny. Let's see the profits they're making. I think that must now become a central demand of all those who are fighting the cost of living. Open the books for public scrutiny. The electrical companies and the energy companies generally are saying they can't pass on the decreases in the cost of gas immediately. They'll do it over time. But when the cost goes up, the increase becomes effective immediately. Do they think we're fools? And then they talk about commercial secrecy. To hell with commercial secrecy. Our living standards are more important than the ins and outs of the capitalist system. In housing, nobody on average wage can buy a house in Dublin now. It's 425,000. That's the average cost of a house here. Not to mention rents. People paying enormous rents can't save sufficient money to make a deposit on a house. And with regard to the banks, Allied Irish Bank last year increased their profits by 79%. 850 million extra for AIB. And Bank of Ireland, by coincidence, made roughly the same amount of money, but their profits went up by 200%. They think we're fools, that we don't notice these things. We do notice them. And the banks should be nationalised and brought into public ownership. We shouldn't be relying on private individuals. That's another demand. Nationalise the banks and let's control what's happening to our money, and also the big financial houses. 1/3 of the cost of a house at the moment is going to the landowner. The landowner has done nothing to construct a house. The landowner hasn't laid blocks, hasn't put any electrical fittings, hasn't done the plumbing, hasn't dug the foundations. The landlord did nothing. And for that, working people contribute hundreds of thousands for every house that's purchased to him, or her as the case might be. That needs to change. And the government needs to build houses themselves through agencies. There's a belief system being put out that the only way society can function is when somebody makes a profit out of it. So if there's no exploitation, there's no progress. What kind of rubbish is that? Everybody who works for a living works as hard as they can to get the best results they can. But for the capitalists, they don't work at all. They just get money from us through the sales, the profits, the house purchasing, and so on. We have a simple demand. Bring this government down. And replace this government with a government of the people committed to socialist policies and equality for everybody, and a decent health service, a decent housing system, a decent education system. We should mention, by the way, in terms of free education, to get a first-year student through school now, it's over €900. Free education. It's terrible. It needs to end. We need to change the system, so bring down the government and replace the government with a socialist government that's committed to policies of equality and policies of progress and a decent system of life for everybody. Thank you.
Rents are rising! Rents are rising! Prices are rising! thought I'd wake you up there. A very, very important part of our coalition is the student movement. And I just want to thank all of the students. They were out protesting during the week. USI outside the Dáil. We had the Postgraduate Workers Organisation out fighting for a living wage for our postgraduate workers. So I'm very glad to welcome the campaigns officer for the Union of Students in Ireland, Zaid Al-Barghouti.
When a government has the surpluses we have, yet the priorities seem deeply mismatched, we end up with a student accommodation crisis that could only be solved with vulture funds posing as student accommodation providers, entering a market that they've been allowed to enter by our government to charge students up here in Dublin up to €1,400 a month to live and pursue an education. When the government wants to get involved, it tells us that there's 30,000 students applied for these options out of necessity and a lack of other options, and that they'll be rejected, and the solution they have for us is that they'll encourage people, homeowners and landlords, to advertise spare rooms for €14,000 tax-free with zero security for student tenants. When they want to be extra creative, they tell us that they give capital grants to our colleges to build student accommodation, yet that is yet to be seen. So our students are constantly losing their dignity, sleeping in cars, couch surfing, while our government tells us that eventually this market will work and the prices will go down. Instead of regulating first-time entrants into this market, building student accommodation themselves, providing social housing for students, and using vacant and derelict properties to house the future of this country and allow them to pursue the education. On the issue of access, this government operates a SUSI grant that Leo Varadkar has absolutely no problem telling us the wonders they've did for it in last year's budget. Yet, the grant does not cover the most financially vulnerable. It certainly does not cover the needs of the financially vulnerable of students. And there is zero intention to do anything about it in this upcoming budget. This back-channel politics that they want us to get stuck in, my minister wants to do that, but another party's minister does not want to provide the funding for that, and it's all out on students. This is the government we have. They have the resources, they just simply don't have the priorities to do that. We have €3,000 for those of us who qualify for something called the Free Fees Initiative as a price to pay to get into education. One of the only proven tools to break the chain of poverty and to invest in a future of a country where every euro invested into that system comes back to be €3 produced for this country in 20, 30, 40 years' times. And yet they dare to tell us that we have free education in this country. I don't see that. I don't think anyone has been taught for free in this country, and as long as these people are in government buildings, we will never have an accessible education system that values the dignity of students, of researchers, of making sure that those who are investing in the future of our country, in research and in innovation in this country, are adequately compensated, that they can take a sick leave when they get sick, that they can have a child without worrying about their grants going away or their positions going away. And yet, they don't seem to have any problems with that, but we are more than happy to point out the problems and take part in collective action like this and make sure that they know that they're not here for to stay, but we are. So, thank you for coming out, and God bless the movement.